I'm Jackie Lucky, your financial planning maestro. This series of podcasts is aimed at financial planning professionals and also those who are looking to enter the financial planning profession. We will be talking during the podcast about all things certified financial planner certification related, talking to other CFPs around the world, and also we will be dropping in on some new entrants who've just entered the financial planning profession, and we'll be checking up along the way on a regular basis with them to see how they're getting on. I hope you enjoy today's podcast. Hello and welcome. I'm Jackie Lucky, your financial planning maestro. And in today's podcast, we are talking all things certified financial planner related and the CISI level 7 case study with Carly Dunningham from Pavis Financial Management. Hello, Carly.
Hi, Jackie.
How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Just getting back into things in the new year. It's good to be here.
Yeah, well, I might ask you about your New Year's resolutions if you make any in a little while, but let's stick to the plan in action. We are going to talk everything about the certified financial planner, and in particular your experience with the case study, how you found it, and hopefully you'll be able to share some tips and insights to other people who are thinking of embarking on the process in 2023. But before we get into all of that, I want to ask you a little bit about how you got into the profession and how many have you held lots of different roles? How did you kind of work your way up?
Okay, so to start with, I came into it intentionally, which seems to be a rare thing. A lot of people say they fell into financial planning, but it was intentional on my part. I just finished my first year of university and I did a summer placement in a bank in NatWest. I thought I wanted to get into banking at that time, in the back office, just doing kind of banking admin. And I clocked this financial planner. I'd never heard of one before. It would have been 1999 then. So I asked if I could shadow him and I sat in a few client meetings. So then at the age of 19, decided that's what I wanted to do.
Wow.
Finishing uni, there were no clear paths really, and I think there are more now. But at that time, you couldn't really get a graduate scheme, and there weren't many clear routes into financial planning. But I luckily got there was a good career service at the university I went to. Who got me a temporary project role with a local IFA firm who needed some students to help build a client database. So I started out with that, and then got a few different roles within that firm. I started out in like an admin support role and then moved up to paraplanner there. They put me through my exams and I just kind of worked my way through. My first client-facing role was a mortgage advisor. So when would that have been? That was 2004. Having gone through the paraplanner role and starting to get my qualifications, I was a mortgage advisor just before the banking crisis, in the crazy times of Northern Rock doing 125% mortgages, so it was all a bit bonkers. And got out of that just in time and qualified as a financial planner a few years later.
And so what was it about those roles that you wanted to keep pursuing?
Just the interaction with clients I've always really enjoyed, and the getting clients to where they want to be, and the problem solving side of it I'd always enjoyed from the very beginning. I always knew I wanted to do something financey related, but it wasn't until I kind of started going down this path that I realised how much I wanted to do financial planning.
Yes, yeah. It was interesting. I was just reading the news earlier today, and the Prime Minister was saying that he thinks everybody should keep studying maths until they're 18. And I know there's a lot of financial planners taking to LinkedIn saying, well, maybe it's not actually maths that we need. Maybe it's helping people understand what mortgages are and how to budget properly and things like that are maths related, aren't they? But perhaps a bit more practical.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, there's a serious lack of that in the curriculum at the minute. I know a lot of people discuss that, but in schools there's just not enough kind of that more practical, basic finance advice. I've just signed up actually to be one of the PFS education champions.
Oh, fantastic.
Where you go into local schools and deliver basic financial education sessions, which are all pre-packaged. But really, it should be part of the curriculum to some level.
Absolutely. Completely agree. So let's move on then and talk about how did you find out about the CFP? Was it when you got to Pavis, or was it before then?
Before then, actually, quite early on. I went to an IFP meeting, a local one, and heard Nick Can speak. And that was when I was a paraplanner. So that's going back to like 2004 or something. So I was aware of it. And I was really interested in the more, because at that time I was working for a firm of financial advisors where it was a lot more of a kind of transactional based advice. And I've been really interested in this holistic approach. I actually went on an IFP paraplanning workshop day, I think, at that time as well. So it was always there on my radar. And the CFP being this thing that I definitely wanted to do at some point. But it never seemed to be the right time. The other things kind of got in the way, life things and different opportunities in the companies that I've worked in. I just kept kind of putting it back, doing other things first. I suppose I was focusing on becoming chartered to start with. But then, having a baby, changing jobs, all the other things that life gets in the way.
Yeah. And so then obviously there came a point where you thought, right, now's the time. It's either now or never. So you decided to bite the bullet and embark on your journey.
Yeah. It's probably that realization that there isn't a right time.
Yes.
Kind of keep up thinking, I kept thinking, this is such a big task. I can't do it now. I've got too many things going on at the moment. And in the end, just thought, no, I'd done as many CII exams as I possibly want to do. Became fellow there. So it was kind of like the next step.
Yeah.
And there isn't ever an exactly perfect time. You just have to fit it in and get on with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm quite often asked, when's the best time, Jackie, in your opinion? I'm like, well, whenever you've got 60 to 100 hours free.
Yeah. You never have. You just have to find the time. I mean, Pavis were going through an acquisition at the same time as me working on my first submission. And it was bonkers. I was just pulled in so many directions, but somehow you carve the time out to do it once you're committed to it.
Yeah. And I think that's it, isn't it? Once you're committed, then you've got to give it your all. And so tell us a little bit about your experience. What was your case study like and how did you approach it?
Yeah, it was a bit of a roller coaster of a journey, really. Kind of highs and lows. Had moments of really enjoying it, really getting into it. And other times just completely beside myself. And every emotion in between. I think the way I approached it was to just try and break it down into bite-sized chunks. Obviously, I got help from yourself, which was really useful in terms of the kind of ongoing support and following your program of how to tackle it, which bits to do in which order, and just focusing on those. So, kind of working on the assumptions and not moving on to anything else until that was done.
Yeah.
And I drew myself out like a little schedule at the start. So over the weeks that I had, I think it's 10 or I can't remember now, 12 weeks. Yeah. The first 2 weeks were just purely just reading the case study over and over and again, making notes, and then moving on to the calculations. And I had all of that written down. So I just tried to stick to this schedule. I went off a little bit, but it helped to start out that way and break it down, as I say, into kind of bite-sized chunks, because I think it's quite easy to feel completely overwhelmed with it when you first get it. You don't know where to start.
Yeah.
So having something like your program where someone, you were telling me, just do this first, or just do this and not think about anything else that's to come next.
Yeah. And I think one of the big traps that people fall into is when they start to feel a bit overwhelmed is they go into solution mode and start thinking, right, well, I think I know this person needs a pension, or I need to, move the assets from husband to wife, or whatever it might be. And that's one of the big things that we talk about on the course, isn't it? Not jumping over all the assumptions and all the analysis and and, making, hasty recommendations perhaps.
Yeah, and that is very easy to do. I think I nearly started to go down that route at the beginning, because your brain just automatically goes there. It's like the problem solving. You look at the case study and start immediately pulling out, well, they should do this and they should do that, without kind of starting from the basics and the assumptions first.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about it then. What were there any particular areas of the case study that you found personally the most challenging? And what steps did you take to try and overcome those challenges?
I think the biggest challenge for me was using Excel. Mm-hmm. And I know that nothing stipulated that you have to use Excel in real life situations. I use Voyant for everything.
Yeah.
But using Excel, I had the most basic working knowledge of it prior to doing this. So that was a real steep learning curve for me. Learning how to do all the formulas and calculations. And I'm so proud of my my spreadsheet now. I like to show it off to people as this amazing piece of work that I did all by myself.
It is absolutely fantastic piece of work. Yeah.
So yeah, that was probably the biggest challenge for me. All the other things, like, as you come across different the research you need to do on assumptions and thinking about all your kind of technical knowledge and tax and things, you can just Google if you need to refresh your knowledge, and deal with things that way. Whereas, the Excel, I'd recommend to anyone who doesn't already have the Excel knowledge to go on some sort of training course, even if it's just a few hours. Because, I spent hours upon hours doing and redoing formulas.
Yes, yeah. And I think some of it is, I've got some people on courses who kind of say, I've kind of looked at the formula, but it doesn't make sense, or it's coming out with the wrong answer, or just given a blank, or whatever it might be. And then I quite often say to them, you've got to think it through as if you were writing it down, rather than, if you were explaining it to me. Like quite often is, in our courses, we do simplified tax calculation, don't we? Which is quite tricky with all those string of if statements that we're working on. And I've had quite a lot of people say, mine doesn't quite look like yours, Jackie. And I can't really see where I've gone wrong. And we quite often end up having a conversation about, well, you need to say, okay, if I was sat in front of you now and you were going, right, Jackie, this is how an income tax calculation works. This bit is your personal allowance, you get that bit free. Then after that, between these two amounts, you get taxed on this bit. Then after that, and so forth. And that kind of approach, that kind of generic, holistic approach actually can work really well, because it's not just a case, is it, of, following the formulae. You've got to understand what you're doing.
Yeah. It's got to make sense. I think I did that a few times, actually, was writing it out. It still took me a while to get my head around it.
Yeah, it does. It does. But do you think that, has it made you look at things differently going through, that experience of building your own Excel spreadsheets? Yeah,
I think it just makes you think a lot more about how everything interacts with one another. So, how meeting one client objective has a knock-on effect with everything else, and that interaction, which you kind of see when you're doing a Voyant cash flow, but just seeing the mechanics of it behind the scenes does make you think a lot more about the impact of one thing on another.
Yes. And I think what's interesting is some people have said to me in the past that they might say have traditionally seen a client who's come to them, say, for retirement planning advice, and they haven't really thought about all of those knock-on effects in the past, whereas now they can actually say, well, yes, we can sort out this one area, but the advice I give is going to have an impact in other areas as well. Is that the kind of thought process that happens to you when you see clients?
Yeah, and things like, get into, like, when you're dealing with the in the cash flow in the case study, thinking about getting to the estate planning section, which is at the very end, and then you're looking at how their wills put together, and that then impacts everything else, because you're like, well, where are you leaving your assets to? Is everything going to the spouse or partner? And those sorts of things prompt when you're speaking to clients, well, what is in your will? Is it as you think it's going to be? Are your family going to be secure if anything happens to you? Or is it going to be, the family might want to leave assets to other members of the family and not realise the impact they're potentially leaving their partner in. So yeah, it does. It just makes you think about it on a more kind of complex level.
Yeah. It's quite interesting, isn't it? The way it's changed or changing your thought process. Having to go through that pain. It was all worth it, wasn't it?
It was. And my certificate arrived yesterday in the post. That made it all feel worth it as well.
Fantastic. Well, I hope you've got that framed on the wall. Get down the shop and get yes, get a lovely frame for it. A big gold frame, I recommend.
I think so.
So how many hours in total do you think it roughly took you to complete your case study submission?
It's a difficult one. I think the guide from the CISI is like 100 hours. I'd say I did at least that, probably more. It's a lot.
Yeah,
it is a lot. And I failed mine on the first submission, and I spent a lot more time than I thought I would on the second. I was thinking when it first came through, it would just be a few tweaks, but a few tweaks in one area impacted everything else, and ended up having to redo pretty much every sheet on my spreadsheet. So I probably did about 30 hours on the second submission at least.
Yeah. Sometimes, some people have said it can, or I think I was talking to somebody else on a podcast a couple of weeks ago, and they were saying it took them nearly 200 hours. They passed on their first submission, but what's interesting is that it seems to be taking in that region of over 100 hours if you calculate all of the hours, including any other, second or third submissions.
Yeah, didn't really keep track, but I spent plenty of full weekends completely engrossed in it.
Yes, all social life on hold for a few months.
Yeah.
But it's, it's a testament to your hard work and determination, Carly, that you got through it really smoothly on your second submission. So many congratulations for that.
Thank you.
So we just touched on, looking forward in your day-to-day advice that you're giving to clients. Is it changing? Is it changing the discussions that you're having with the other guys in the firm, perhaps, as well as the clients? Or is it primarily the way things have changed for you personally? Is it's helping you more with clients?
Yeah, probably a bit of both. It's helping me more with clients. I'm actually in the process of redesigning how we present how we present a financial plan to clients. It's prompted me to think about how the information is presented and what we actually produce for a client in terms of that initial plan. So I've been speaking to the team about that, and we're looking at getting something completely redesigned in the way that's put together. So I don't think I would have thought about doing that if it hadn't been for going through this process. And just making it as client friendly and all encompassing as possible. There's so much to put into it, but making it in an easy to understand and follow way that clients will actually read and not just put in a drawer because it's too long-winded.
Yeah. And that's the difficulty, isn't it? There's so much that you have to include, and then we love our jargon, don't we? So there's so much jargon that naturally goes into it too.
Yeah, all the time. And we're redesigning our suitability reports as well at the moment. Just you kind of go through this exercise every few years of going, what can we strip out? What generic terms and things have slipped into our templates that don't need to be there?
Yes.
Yeah, constantly evolving them.
Yeah, and I think it's tricky, isn't it? When lots of people have said to me in the past, once they've been through the CFP, about transitioning what and incorporating that into the business. And some people have said, for example, as part of their investment committee, the first point on their agenda is to discuss assumptions that they never had on their agenda before. And, just prompts you to kind of look into all of those corners If you're using Voyant as you are, then, how is Voyant working? How are the assumptions in Voyant used? And are you plugging in the right assumptions?
Completely. Yeah, that is a big one actually coming out of this is the realizing the impact of assumptions and making sure that they are reasonable and realistic. And we have actually this thing like on our advisor roundtable meetings that we have monthly, I've started putting on the agenda regularly now as the Voyant assumptions, which we've always, I think we kind of review them once a year or so, but just to make us really question and think about what we're using there, making sure it's still appropriate.
Yeah.
And then thinking about how one assumption impacts another.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, interesting how, we've got more people living longer, haven't we? There'll come a point in your assumptions discussions where 100 won't be long enough if you're doing the cash flows to 100. And also, the current environment with higher rates of inflation, does there come a point where you kind of have to say, well, it goes on a certain amount of time that you start to factor that in over the long term, or not, maybe.
Yeah, or how long is it going to be high? Yeah.
How long? How long is a piece of string? And all of that kind of thing. But I think that's, these kind of things, forcing you to think through those during your case study actually can be really useful, because even if the answer is we're happy with what we've got, you can still document that, can't you? And it's a robust process that you've got from a business perspective.
Yeah, that's it. You've at least documented that you've thought about everything that you're using, whether it's still appropriate or needs to be changed.
Yeah. Really interesting. Very interesting. Excellent. Well, I'm glad that the pain was kind of worth it. And that it's been definitely beneficial for you personally and professionally with clients as well as with the others in the firm. Let's move on to look at some of the wider aspects of financial planning before I come back at the end and ask you about your tips for other people who might be embarking on the process. But, for me, growing up in the profession, in my 20s, there weren't many female financial planners around at all. In fact, I think I went to my first conference in 1999, and I think there were 3 female financial planners, and about 350 guys at the conference. So, what's your experience of getting the support and, having, other people, other female financial planners to look up to?
Yeah, well, I had very similar experience to you when I first started out as well, which would have been like 2002, 2003, same kind of thing, going into conferences and rooms and it just being mainly men and the odd woman dotted around. And I think when you're younger, that can be sometimes quite intimidating. I think the most important thing for me being a woman in financial planning is making sure you are putting yourself in the right environment and getting the right level of support. So in one of my previous firms, I was the only woman who was a financial planner, and it was more sales focused than where I am now at Pavis. So I was told I wasn't salesy enough, and I kind of went through periods of questioning whether I was in the right role, but stuck with it. And then once I moved to Pavis, it was a whole different experience because it's a lot more of a more professional financial planning firm, and I had an amazing mentor, Julie, who's a director and financial planner at Pavis. So having that kind of role model to look up to really helped me, and we work in a very similar way. So I found myself I am in the right place, I'm doing the right job. I just wasn't in the right place before. I think it does make a big difference to have those role models, whether they're in the same firm as you or, there's lots of ways to connect with communities through Facebook and other social media and things like that at the moment, to connect with other female financial planners to support each other. And there's lots of that going on, and it's amazing to see.
Yeah. And now, I think the last conference we went to, where the numbers were completely different, weren't they? There weren't just 3 of us in the room.
Lots of us. I wonder if at some point we might outnumber.
I think so, yes.
That'd be good
I was
to see.
frantically counting, actually, because I think we're not too far away from many conferences being, about a 50-50 split, even, maybe more females than males in some conferences.
Yeah.
I think maybe the day will come, maybe. And I know that you personally do a lot, helping other females and helping anybody, actually, who wants to get into financial planning, don't you? You're very active on platforms like the Next Gen platform and helping with conferences. I know you've done some of the Friday commutes, haven't you?
I have, yes. I did a commute a few weeks ago. I think it's important. I mean, I enjoy this. I enjoy what I do. I really enjoy it, and it's kind of helping other people to come through because I want them to get in and see how amazing it is as well. I've always kind of put myself out to kind of help. We've just recently taken on a new recruit, a young guy who left university, and he just took the initiative to connect with me on LinkedIn a few years ago while he was still at university and just asked if he could come in for a coffee. So I gave him like half an hour chat. He really wanted to get into financial planning. And then we've kept in touch. I put him in touch with Next Gen at some point. And then when we had a vacancy open up, he's come on board. But yeah, I think it's important to help the next generation of financial planners come through and introduce them to it because it's still not widely known enough. I give a careers talk to John Moores University every year to their, I think it's Masters in Accounting and Finance. And a lot of the students, they're naturally pushed towards accountancy because the university it's easier for them to promote accountancy because there are big graduate schemes available and they don't know as much about financial planning and how to direct the students and the graduates there. So it's just getting the word out, isn't it? Getting more people to know about it.
Yeah. And, you've got to be a trailblazer yourself, haven't you? So that, the maximum number, if we're all a trailblazer in our own right, then that means that we can, attract the attention of more people who might be interested in joining. Yeah,
exactly.
And so what would you say to other women who might be interested in joining the profession now, who maybe, like you and I, our original experience, thinking it's a bit more salesy and that's not really my thing?
I'd say I think it's hopefully less that way than it used to be. I think it's a great profession for women generally. Don't want to be too kind of general and stereotyping, but generally women can be more empathetic and I think make really good financial planners. Now that it is not a salesy focused role, I think it's more suited to women. As I said before, I think for anyone thinking of starting out, just find the support, reach out to other female planners. I think it's great how much people are supporting each other on social media. And make sure you find the right environment.
Yeah. And if you're not enjoying it, then that's not necessarily that you don't enjoy financial planning. It might be that you're not in the right environment, mightn't it?
Yeah. Just look around and find a new home.
Yes.
That's more suited.
Find some other like-minded people wherever they may be.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the advantages, isn't it, from, the pandemic, is that it's so much easier to connect to people and have a chat online. You don't have to be in the local vicinity. Yeah,
it's just made us... It's funny, isn't it, that option was always there. We always had we've had it for a while, the ability to just have a chat on Zoom and connect online. Same with client meetings, really. The technology was always there, but a lot of us weren't using it. You just kind of do everything in face-to-face, in person. Yeah. But it is a lot easier, and there's so many groups out there to join and people supporting each other. I'm sure most people like us, if they're approached, they will offer some guidance or help.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think that women make better financial planners than men?
Oh, that's a controversial one, isn't it?
I think they do.
I think they can, again, just being really generally, yes. I think they can. I suppose we're all different. There'll be men who make better financial planners than other men. But yeah, I do think we make good financial planners. We're good at listening, which is such a big thing to be able to listen well. And yeah, maybe we do make better financial planners.
I'm starting a one-woman revolution for every woman I talk to. Okay, well, before all the men in Pavis Financial Management start jumping all over you and shouting the odds, we better move on swiftly. Right. So let's return to a couple of final questions that we've got for you about the CFP. And, what are the things that if you were talking to somebody today who was thinking about doing the CFP, what were the things that you would advise them to do? Do you have any tips or any advice for somebody who was thinking, 2023 is going to be my year?
Yeah, I've got a few. I started thinking about this before we spoke. And as I mentioned at the start, I think break it into chunks. Don't get, try not to get overwhelmed. Just make a schedule at the start and tackle one thing at a time. Yeah. Really get to know your case study inside out to start with. Read it over and over, highlight it, make notes, write down the objectives that you're pulling out, write them down again, and just be really familiar with it before you put pen to paper or start the calculations. Get help, like Jackie's course or others that are out there. Just having someone to be supposed to help you, keep you accountable to the kind of timeline and help you to break it down into those different sections to know, you want to focus on the calculations. And actually, I couldn't have done those Excel spreadsheets without your course. Thinking about it, I just would not have had a clue where to start. And I literally just followed it step by step when I was building the spreadsheets. So I definitely suggest going on some kind of course. And getting help. The next gen help was really good as well. We had the weekly catch-ups, or I can't remember how regularly they were now, but we had kind of sessions where you'd just catch up with everyone and people would raise issues. Yeah. And it was good to talk it through in that format. So, a problem that someone else is having might just try to think, well, I'm going to come across that. So it was helpful to be part of those groups. Yeah. I'd say don't take it to heart when you get if you fail on the first submission or second, don't take the feedback to heart, because I think that can be very easy to do. You initially just think you put your heart and soul into the work, you've spent hours. And then some of the points can seem, they can seem petty on first glance of it. And I know people who haven't they've just given up on the process. They haven't gone forward to do another submission because it's got the backup so much that they've been failed on points that they don't agree with the assessor. And I think you've just got to kind of take a step back from it, not take it personally, and just deal with it the way you dealt with the original case study. Just tackle each point at a time and try and take the emotion out of it. Just whatever they're asking for, tackle it, adjust it, then move on and work through it. Because you do. It's just, I suppose, a natural human reaction to kind of get you back up a little bit when something is critical of the work that you've done. But I think the majority of people fail on the first submission. So it's just a process you have to go through. Yeah.
Yeah. And do you think that, once you calm down, if you like, after you reading initially your feedback from the CISI from your first submission, did you broadly agree with what they were saying, or you could see what they were trying to get at?
Yes. I think, again, some of it still seemed a little petty, but they kind of say you haven't justified that assumption enough, and I think, well, I put that there, so you just have to bulk it out a little bit more. But most of it I would have agreed with. I actually made quite an obvious and silly mistake in my calculations.
Oops.
For the life assurance, the kind of protection element of it. which when I look back, I could see what I'd done wrong. And that then impacted. I got marked down on a few areas of the assessment just on that one mistake because it had a knock-on effect. So yeah, I felt rather silly when I realised I'd made this silly mistake. But yeah, you just put it right and get on with it.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think, you know, in a body of work that large, 60 pages, which actually could have been a lot more than 60 pages with all our spreadsheets that we wanted to put in but couldn't get in, you're bound to, statistically, you're bound to make a mistake. It's very hard on you know, you're writing what, in excess of 12,000 words, maybe 15,000 words in 60 pages. With the complexity of, like we said earlier, you know, the knock-on effects of making recommendations, and then the knock-on effect of that, you know, as you said, you know, with your protection, making one mistake, it can feel like the feedback looks a bit like a horror story, but actually it's just that one thing that needs fixing. But because of the knock-on effect it's having all over the place, then obviously it's being picked up in a lot of the different learning outcomes to mark, isn't it?
Yeah, that's it. And with that one mistake, I realised once I put it right, I then had to redo every sheet in my workbook.
Yeah. But at least we built the work. We built the Excel spreadsheets in a way that they could be amended. I've come across people who haven't done the spreadsheets in the way that we did them together, and have had to create new spreadsheets. Which obviously is even more time consuming. So if you're building your own spreadsheets out there, then just be mindful of the fact that you might need to amend them. And if you do, how easy is it to amend them? Because that could be a whole new horror story, or, you know, could be introducing more accidental errors into that, couldn't you?
Yeah, easily. Yeah, and I think the way, obviously, that we built the way that you showed to build them, everything links in with other pages, so it does make it easy. You can make one change somewhere and it updates everything across the board.
Absolutely.
And I'm just thinking of another tip as we're speaking is don't underestimate the time it takes for the final touches. Actually putting the spreadsheets into the appendix took me so long and I hadn't expected it to. Just, you know, formatting them correctly and then copying and pasting them in and them all fitting within this 60-page limit, those final bits took me a long time.
All the kind of fiddling around, as I call it, my technical term.
Good term. That you kind of think, oh, I'm nearly finished now, all I've got to do is throw these sheets into the back and then it's all packaged up, ready to go. But it's not that easy.
Not that easy. No. It takes a bit of thinking. And did you find it difficult to keep inside the 60 pages?
Actually, didn't on my first submission. But then on the second one I did, was I had to add quite a few things in. And I think I was on about 62 or 63 pages, and I kept having to just take words and sentences out here and there and slim my sheets down. It is tricky. It is tricky getting it within the 60 pages.
And I wonder whether some of that is because you don't have the interaction with a real client, because there are some things you would chat to them about, aren't there? Whereas obviously with your case study, you've got to write it all in there.
And that is the strange thing about it, isn't it? When you compare it to a real client, you'd never, with a real client, tackle absolutely everything in one go like that. You'd normally do things one thing at a time, or a few things at a time. But yeah, the fact that you can't discuss with them, you've got to put every little thing and every little assumption that you've made in that report.
Yeah, absolutely. And just a quick one, do you know roughly how many pages your assumptions stretch to?
How many pages the assumptions? I think 3.
That's good going, yeah.
Is it? Was it 3 or was it spilling onto book? I know that the guideline was trying to keep it within 2 and that just wasn't happening at all.
Yes, I always say to people, don't I? 2 pages. And then now I'm saying more than 4 and you're in trouble. And everybody looked at me, and the other day somebody said to me, oh, Jackie, I've written 7. I was like, okay, that's probably too many. You've only got 60 pages and you've written the 7 pages of assumptions, so you need to...
slim it down a bit.
Slim it down a little bit, yeah. And I think, maybe because of the lack of client interaction, there's, certainly when I did my CFP, it was quite a long time ago now, I had this urge to kind of waffle a bit more than I otherwise would have done because of that lack of personal interaction. Did you feel the urge to kind of, make more fluff or more background and when you were trying to write your plan?
Yeah, I probably did, because as you say, there were things, if it was a real client, you'd be discussing with them in person, and you have to well, I've assumed you would do this in this situation, I've assumed you would do this, whereas in real life you'd actually just ask them the questions.
Just ask them, yeah.
Rather than having to make all of those assumptions about what they may or may not do.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can see that. And it is easy to waffle, and that that makes it even more difficult to get within 60 pages.
Yes, I came across somebody the other day, and they had written the same paragraph for their emergency cash fund and why it was the amount that they were recommending 4 times. And because the paragraph was quite big, they'd actually wasted a page.
My gosh.
And you think
you can't waste a page.
That. Yeah, but 1 page, it doesn't sound like a lot, does it? But 1 page, if you could have 1 page back.
Yeah, it's important, that 1 page.
It's important. It could be. It absolutely could be. So, yeah.
I remember you saying actually that when we first started the course, kind of don't try not to repeat, and I kept thinking about that all the way through, not to repeat whatever you put in the assumptions appendix. You don't need to justify again in the report, which it's easy to go down that path.
It is. Yeah, it is. Yeah, very interesting. Carly, it's been an absolute pleasure. We're out of time, but it's been an absolute joy to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today, and congratulations on becoming a certified financial planner.
Thank you very much, Jackie. I've enjoyed our chat.
I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. It's really interesting, isn't it, to listen to other people's points of view about different things, all relating to our wonderful financial planning profession. If you know anyone who might be interested in listening to any of these podcasts, please pass on our details to them. So that's it from me. Join me again next time when we'll be talking all things certified financial planner related, and also dropping in on our new entrants to the financial planning profession. Bye for now.